Hi guys and welcome back to the Mighty Blues. My name is of course Cameron and welcome back today to another live stream. It is Friday, I hope you all are doing well. It is the game preview, Brighton and Hove Albion versus Everton on Monday evening at the Amex. Another away game for Sean Dyche, another game in which Everton search for our second away win of this current Premier League season, with only 4 games to go. Everton still in search of a second away win, and the search will continue at one of probably the most difficult grounds to go to in the Premier League, in Brighton. Brighton are a side that have had a really, really good season this season, currently sitting 6th in the Premier League table. 32 games played, 16 wins, 7 draws, and just the 9 losses, sitting on 55 points, 4 points below Liverpool, who currently sit in 5th. Brighton, of course, winning last night, which is why we've waited to do this game preview, because Brighton did play Manchester United last night at the Amex, and they won 1-0 thanks to a 99th minute penalty by Alexis McAllister. In their previous games, again, they faced Wolves at the weekend, again at the Amex, so 3 home games on the bounce for Brighton, and they've scored 7 goals in their last 2 home games. A 6-0 win against Wolverhampton Wanderers last weekend. The last time they were away from home, they lost 3-1 to Nottingham Forest, and that, of course, come after that semi-final, FA Cup semi-final against Manchester United, in which they played over 120 minutes and were knocked out on penalties. But obviously, in regard to their recent home form, you have to go back a fairly long time to find Brighton losing a game at the Amex Stadium. 4-0 win against West Ham in there, a 1-0 win against Brighton, a 3-3 draw with Brentford. The last time they lost at home was a 1-0 defeat to Fulham on the 18th of February. But as I've just mentioned there, 7 goals in their last 2 home games. Of course, that big 6-0 win coming against Wolverhampton Wanderers last weekend. And it ultimately presents itself as a really, really difficult challenge for Sean Dyche and for Everton to go and get anything out of. And when we sat here yesterday and we looked at the remaining 4 games of the season, and we analysed each game and where I believe Everton will pick up points and how I believe Everton will pick up points, this was a game that was quite difficult to put your finger on, because this is one that I could quite easily see Brighton turning up and putting 3 or 4 past us, exactly like they did at Goodison Park earlier on in the season, and beating us convincingly. But I could also see Everton working hard, battling, fighting till the end, putting in a good performance and getting something. Now, can I see Everton winning this game? I'll be brutally honest, no, because I've said it before and I will say it again, and I'm sick of repeating myself. I don't see Everton winning another away game this season, which would see us down, by the way, unless we miraculously manage to beat Manchester City at Goodison Park. It would probably see us down, or, 2 points in both of the away games, a point here and a point at Wolves, with the 3 points at Bournemouth. That may see us stay up, but realistically, we could do with winning, one of the 2 remaining away games that we have this season. This one, of course, presents itself as a much more difficult challenge than the Wolves game because of the difference in quality. Brighton have had an absolutely fantastic season, and currently on on course to finish in a European position, and it is really, really tight down there. To be fair, Aston Villa are only on 54 points and they're in 8th. Tottenham are on 54 points and they're in 7th. So there is a world in which Brighton don't finish in a European position. However, given their form, given their performances recently, they will fancy themselves to finish in those European places, which is massive for a club like Brighton, who have not long been promoted into the Premier League, done well obviously under Graham Potter, with Dan Ashworth there to sort of solidify their Premier League status. They've brought Dyche in, who I think has done a wonderful, wonderful job since coming in, and as I said, European football for Brighton would be, a fantastic, fantastic achievement. However, as I've said with most of the game previews in recent weeks and months, it's not really about Brighton this weekend. Monday evening at 5:30, which is a mad kick-off time, but obviously that's because of, everything going on this weekend. But again, it's not really about Brighton. It's about Everton, and can Everton go out there and get something? And whilst I'm not sitting here particularly confident that Everton will win this game purely based on not only our away form, but also how good Brighton have been this season and how good Brighton are at home, but also there is a world in which I can see us getting a point from this game, and a point from this game may be enough to build a little bit of confidence to go into, the final 3 games of the season and get enough points to be able to stay in the Premier League. If you didn't see that video yesterday, then I do recommend checking it out. We sat there and we went through basically everybody's remaining fixtures that are in and around the relegation battle. We looked at Leicester, we looked at Forest, we looked at Leeds United, and of course we looked at Everton as well. And I summarised that, that Everton would need 5 points to stay up, and that would be us staying up on goal difference ahead of Nottingham Forest. It would mean Nottingham Forest going down on goal difference. If we were to get any less than 5 points, then I think we'll go down with Leeds. And if we were to get more than 5 points, then I think we'll stay up on points. But for us to get 5 points would pretty much mean us getting something out of this game, on the assumption that we won't get anything out of that game against Manchester City next week. We'd at least have to get a point in this one. Otherwise, the pressure is all on that game against Wolves at Molineux in a couple of weeks' time, to obviously to win. So this is another massive game. I have somebody commenting constantly on the channel saying, Cam, is this a must-win game? Is this a must-win game? Because that must be what I'm saying every single week about every game. But the reality is, every game at the moment is a must-win game. The reality is that there aren't many left between now and the end of the season, and there aren't many points left to pick up between now and the end of the season. Just, for comparison's sake, Nottingham Forest have got Southampton at home this weekend, which I'm pretty confident in saying will be a comfortable win for Nottingham Forest. I think also on Monday night there's another relegation rival game. Let me just go onto the scoring app. Fulham play Leicester away from home. So on Monday night you've got Fulham Leicester, Brighton Everton, and Forest Southampton. So that really is another day that we can't afford to be the only team that doesn't pick up points, because at the end of that night, at the end of Monday night, we could be in a position where Nottingham Forest have won, which I think is very likely. I've seen a few people say Nottingham Forest won't pick up another point this season. I would bet a lot of money that Nottingham Forest will wipe the floor with Southampton on Monday night. And we could be in a situation where Leicester have won as well, albeit that is a much more difficult game for Leicester and maybe not as realistic, but it could happen, and we could be sitting here, Leicester winning, Nottingham Forest winning, and Everton losing, and then that would be an absolute disaster of a weekend for us. So we really do need to get something out of this game. I'm sort of sick of sitting here saying it's a must-win, it's a must-win, it's a must-win, because as I've said, every game at this stage in the season is a must-win. What I also think every game is pretty much at this stage in the season is a must-not-lose. And I think we've already sort of come to the conclusion as Evertonians that game against Manchester City next weekend is probably going to be one that Everton don't get anything out of. Now, don't get me wrong, that's not me having a defeatist mentality. That's just me understanding that Manchester City are an absolute powerhouse at this stage in the season. They've got a record-breaking goal scorer who is, absolutely ripping defenders to bits, and then me looking at Everton's current form and Everton's defence and thinking there's only one way that game is going, and of course it doesn't work like that. Everton could surprise us, we could win that game, we could get something out of that game, and we'll all be leaving Goodison massively surprised. However, you don't know, do you? Ultimately, the odds are certainly in favour of Manchester City, so that means that the other 3 games, specifically this one on Monday night, is a must-not-lose. And if we get a point out of this one, then it does take a little bit of pressure off that game against Wolves, because as I said, if we can then go and get a point against Wolves, then I think 3 points on the final day of the season against Bournemouth would be enough. But if we were to lose this game, which again is very possible given Brighton's form and given Brighton's quality, and they have got a lot of that. You know, De Zerbi has shown in recent weeks and months that his teams are more than capable of playing good football and more than capable of taking the game to an opposition. And if they do that against Everton, then there's a very high possibility that it could end up a cricket score, because Everton simply aren't, haven't got that quality that Brighton have got. But if we can get something, then it means that, as I said, if we don't get anything this weekend, then we really are relying on either going and, shocking everybody with winning against Manchester City, or winning those final 2 games of the season, which, when was the last time Everton won 2 games on the bounce? I don't know, the beginning of last season maybe. I don't know. The end of last season maybe. Again, probably wasn't it, Chelsea and Leicester? But yeah, we certainly haven't done it this season. So yeah, again, we understand the importance of this. It's pretty much copy and paste from what we said, about Leicester. Obviously, it's not as big as the Leicester game, because Leicester are a fellow team that in a relegation battle, and it really was sort of a 6-pointer, that one, that neither team ended up winning, and this one is much more different. But it's also much more difficult because Brighton are a much better team than Leicester, and Brighton are not by any sense of the imagination on the beach. I think Brighton will be looking at this one and thinking this is a big opportunity to pick up a valuable 3 points in that race for European football, because it's not like they're comfortably sitting in those European places. As we've just mentioned, Liverpool are right behind them, I think a point behind. Oh, sorry, not Liverpool. Tottenham are right behind them by a point, and Aston Villa are on the same amount of points as Tottenham, and even Brentford are on 50. So, a win and a draw for Brentford, and they're right back up there as well. So, again, Brighton and Roberto De Zerbi will almost certainly feel the need to go and get something out of this game, and go and give themselves an advantage in that race for European football. But unfortunately for Everton, we can't afford to allow that to happen. We simply need to go out and we need to get something out of this game, and it will be difficult. Brighton have got some fantastically talented players. Matoma, who of course scored at Goodison earlier on in the season, I think he's a fantastic player. They've got the likes of Caicedo, who was rumoured to be going elsewhere for 80-90 million pounds in January. Alexis McAllister, who I'm sure will leave the club in the summer, but again is a fantastic player, scored the penalty last night. Evan Ferguson, who's had a wonderful breakthrough season and had scored some really important goals for Brighton. And we obviously all know, the likes of Danny Welbeck, Pascal Gross, etc. A really, really, really good squad. Levi Colwill as well, of course, who's a really good young up-and-coming centre-back. They've got a really, really, really good squad, Brighton, and they've got a squad full of really capable and talented footballers who are more than capable of playing good football, and we've seen that at Goodison Park early on this season. They absolutely wiped the floor with us. At one point it was pretty much, I was in disbelief at what what I was watching. They were just unbelievable, and that is what this Brighton team is capable of. But we can't afford to allow them to do that on Monday night. And as I've said in the title of this live stream, will Sean Dyche surprise us? And he almost has no choice but to surprise us on Monday night. And by surprise us, what I mean is with the team selection, with his in-game decisions, and ultimately by doing something that he failed to do against Leicester City, and that is show that little bit of bravery. Ultimately, we have to see changes on Monday night. We cannot go into this game with Michael Keane at centre-back, because he will be absolutely tormented for the entirety of this game if he starts. We cannot go into this game with an unwillingness to make a change with 20 minutes to go if, there's still a game there to be won. Ultimately, we can't afford to lose this game. We can't. As I said, there's a big possibility we do lose this game because of the significant gulf in quality between the two teams, but we can't afford that. We can't afford to lose a game at this stage in the season when we've already got a game next week that pretty much everybody is, contested that we're probably likely to lose because of the fact that we're playing, the champions in Manchester City. So, I appreciate it's a difficult position for Sean Dyche to be in, and I appreciate this is a difficult fixture. Having said that, of course, the one of the only two teams that we beat last season away from home was Brighton, which may have something to I don't know, take from that game in terms of this one. Probably not, because obviously of the fact that it's a completely different Brighton side. They've got a different manager, they've got a different set of players, but maybe the Everton players will remember certain things about certain Brighton players to be able to target. One thing I would say is Nottingham Forest beat this Brighton team 3-1 a number of weeks ago, and okay, that come off the back of Brighton playing a semi-final for 120 minutes and obviously really difficult circumstances, but they've shown that they are beatable. They've shown that they're beatable, and they've shown that you can get behind them, you can create chances. They beat us 4-1 at Goodison early on in the season, and it was a disaster. I remember it really, really well. It was a disaster. But they've shown that you can get behind them, you can create chances, and they are beatable, albeit that was Nottingham Forest at home, and this is, Everton away, which is two very, 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 very different situations. But they can concede goals, they can lose games, they can lose their heads, and there will be pressure on Brighton as well. Brighton are a team that don't have a European football pedigree. They don't have experience in the European competition, so the fact that they are so close to potentially playing Europa League football this season, there will be pressure on their players and their manager to get over the line and to ultimately create themselves a little bit of space between teams like Tottenham and Aston Villa, who both do have that experience of playing in Europe. Okay, Aston Villa's is a bit more historical, but they've got that there, whereas Brighton don't have that. So it's not like this Brighton team have got absolutely no pressure on them, and it'll be a walk in the park. Of course, it's a very different type of pressure than the one that Everton have got on them, but it's still a pressure. And if Sean Dyche and Everton can tap into that and try and expose that, then we've got to do as much as that as we can on Monday night to get something out of this game. The reality is, as I've just mentioned, the manager needs to surprise us, and I'll be as absolute blunt as possible. I don't want to see Michael Keane in that starting 11, because it absolutely spells disaster all over it. And as I said, he needs to be proactive. He needs to make changes if need be. If we're 1-0 down with 20 minutes to go and you've got Demarai Gray on the bench or Ellis Sims on the bench, then make that change, bring them on. Who knows, you could end up going and getting something out of that game. Even if we're not 1-0 down, even if it's 0-0, we can't settle for points at this stage in the season. We simply can't settle for points at this stage in the season. And I understand, they beat Wolves, by 6 a couple of weeks ago, and I get it, but, that was a freak result. Tottenham got absolutely bladdered by Newcastle, and the week later they got a point against Manchester United. It was a freak result, that, and I highly doubt that they'll be able to replicate that again. But ultimately, it's down for the manager and for these players to surprise us, because that's what it'll take. If Everton win this game, it will be a surprise. By every sense of the word, it will be a surprise. But we need a surprise at this stage in the season, because if we don't get a surprise, then Everton are going down. If Everton stay up this season, it will be because of a surprise. We've managed to win 2 games on the bounce, which would be a massive shock at this point. We've managed to beat Manchester City at Goodison, which would be a massive shock at this point. So, let's hope that the players can surprise us and the manager does make a couple of, much needed changes. And, we give ourselves the best chance of going out and winning this game. In terms of team news, I'm going to go with Jordan Pickford in goal. I'm going to go with Mikalenko at left back, Nathan Patterson at right back. That's another thing. If Dyche persists with this playing out of form centre backs at right back over Nathan Patterson, then again, that simply isn't going to work. I'd go with Connor Cody and James Tarkowski back at in the centre back. If he is to change Michael Keane, I don't think it will be for Yerry Mina. I think the only player he would potentially change him for is putting Connor Cody back in there. And yeah, he has to change Michael Keane. He's got no choice at this point. He simply has to take Michael Keane out of this team. Midfield, I would go with Garner, Takore, and would I throw Onana back in there, or would I keep James Garner in there? I think he probably will throw Onana back in there, and James Garner will probably come out, which may be a little bit harsh on James Garner because he has done well since he's come in. However, I think that's probably the more likely decision that we're going to see. And then front three, I would go with Demarai Gray on the right I'd go with Dwight McNeil on the left, and I'd go with Dominic Calvert-Lewin up front. I wouldn't have Alex Iwobi in there. I just unfortunately don't think he was good enough the other night. I know he scored the equaliser, but his whole game was really, really poor other than that. Damari caused problems against Brighton last season at the Amex, although obviously, as we've mentioned, a very different Brighton side and very different circumstances. But I just think his pace, his energy might be something that we can use to exploit them. Dom up front, who as well scored in that game at the Amex, so hopefully he can find his shooting boots again. And then Dwight McNeil, who fully deserves to keep his place for me. And yeah, look, this will be an incredibly difficult game. There's no two ways about it. Am I confident? Absolutely not. Can I see Everton getting something out of this game? I can, yeah. Do I think that will be a win? I'm not quite sure. I'm that deluded yet. But I can definitely see us getting a point out of this game, and a point could be massive, by the way. One thing I don't think Everton can really afford to do is lose this game. Because, as I said, if we lose this game, and Leicester and Forest both win their games, then I think we're starting to look at, we were playing in the Championship next season at that point. So, yeah, pressure's on, but, the pressure's been on for a number of weeks, and Everton have not yet been able to deal with that. So, hopefully that changes on Monday night. Anyway, we're going to leave it there. If you have enjoyed it, please hit that like button. We will be back maybe before that game, but if not, we'll be back with the instant match reaction and the player ratings directly after it, so don't forget to look out for those. Big thanks to everybody for watching the live comments. I really, really do appreciate it. If you're watching as a YouTube video, leave your thoughts down below and we'll get involved with as many of them as we can. But big thank you all for watching. Leave a like if you've enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new, and we'll see you later.